Dr. Compradero, President and CEO of the International Crisis Group. We're here at the Paris Peace Forum, but ironically, it seems like peace is incredibly elusive all around the world. And I wanted to ask you, as a conflict expert, why is diplomacy failing and peacekeeping failing in so many examples?
It's a very good question. It's a question that we ask every day. We see wars rising, we see more people displaced, more refugees. And I think at the heart of the matter is a crisis of peacemaking. Gone are the days where you saw comprehensive peace processes and peace settlements. I think the last serious one that we saw was in Colombia in 2016. I mean, quite frankly, we are in the era of big power rivalry. And a multipolar world where there are more actors piling in. And there's nothing wrong principally with the idea of multipolarity. But the problem is that you've got competing interests, competing visions, and it's not quite clear then how you begin to craft a clear path to peace, whether it's in Gaza, whether it's in Haiti, whether it's in Ukraine, whether it's in Sudan. Getting to the peace table is difficult. And quite frankly, actors see no reason or see no interest because the old tools that would nudge actors to the table, that will force actors to the table, sanctions, some kind of interventions, they're no longer working. So the guardrails themselves are weak. And the one key institution, the United Nations Security Council, the chamber of international peace and security itself is increasingly dysfunctional, which makes it very hard to even craft just a basic peace deal to get people to the table.
Now that seems like a critical question, one that's been raised. How do you begin to reform the Security Council when the rules are clear about who the permanent members are and that they have a veto?
Yeah, and even more so in an age where you've got rising powers, middle powers, in different spheres of influence in various regions as well. And increasingly, they see themselves as the actors that have the key leverage. They are influential, they are shaping facts on the ground, and you cannot ignore them any longer. You know, to get a peace deal, for example, in Sudan requires a cast of characters that are across the other side of the aisle in the Gulf region as well, and also in the north as well. So there is no tidy it was never tidy. It was messy, but the sense before that, you know, we knew who the actors were, but today there are a multitude of actors piling in into all the crises that we watch, and the Security Council may not be the best representative to address those conflicts. We have to go elsewhere to make sure that we can get the right people at the table to solve particular conflicts today.
You mentioned Sudan. Millions displaced, tens of thousands dead, 18 months plus of a battle. Not necessarily front page news in the way that Ukraine and Gaza are. So just for our audience, can you give us a little bit of a level set of how significant the crisis is?
Yeah, it's pretty significant. I mean, I don't like to get into the whataboutism and, you know, why not Sudan, but you know, when you look at the statistics today in terms of the numbers, the humanitarian situation, famine, drought, you know, Sudan is right at the top. It's not Gaza, not Ukraine, but it's Sudan. It doesn't get the same media intention, but it's not necessarily off the radar. I mean, in the week of the United Nations General Assembly meeting, Sudan was a topic of conversation alongside Ukraine and Gaza as well. So I sense it's been deprioritized. You know, and no leader particularly is prepared to expend significant political capital. And right now, we're at the end of the rainy season. Both sides see no reason to stop fighting. The war is existential to them. It's a matter of survival. No particular actor is able to nudge them to the table. Meanwhile, civilians are caught in the crossfire. No access to basic services, no access to food, to water. It's a dire situation. Just as a strike a humanitarian deal to get a ceasefire, to deal with civilian protection is incredible. And we are talking, by the way, 20 years on from Darfur, when we said never again. And here we are, and Sudan is on the verge of collapse. And it's not just Sudan that's in trouble here. If Sudan collapses, it's Chad, it's South Sudan, to the north, it's Egypt. So it's a very delicate time in Sudan, and getting either the Sudanese armed forces or the rapid support forces to put their arms down, to come to the table, they see no interest. What they see is the battlefield is where the relevance is for them.
These ongoing conflicts have also created a migrant crisis, frankly. People displaced within their own countries, but oftentimes displaced internationally at a time when there's growing anti-immigrant sentiment. We saw it in the US election and we're seeing it in Europe. How do you assess that risk?
Yeah, I mean, increasingly people are now saying, if you don't deal with Sudan, if you can't strike credible peace processes that hold together, you're going to see more floodgates of migrants. But migrants are coming to the region. Can you imagine that their refugees are actually going to South Sudan first, which is in a dire state in itself. They're going to Central African Republic. They're going to Chad, just on the border alone of Chad. So while Europe is concerned and rightfully worried about migrations, those refugees are fleeing first. The very first place they come into is in the region. But you're quite right to say that if you want to deal with migration also, you have to do with why people are wanting to flee as well. So if you're concerned about migration, at least let's have a serious conversation about how you bring an end to the wars. Otherwise, you're going to continue to see this flee, whether it's into the neighborhood or whether it's into Europe as well.
It gets to the point of this entire conference, which is finding a more functional global order.
Yeah.
Obviously, we just wrapped the UN General Assembly a couple months ago as well. UN 2.0, this concept is emerging, and there's a lot of discussion about how to better include the global South. What would that look like to you for that to actually be effective?
One of the things that emerged out of this particular UN was the Summit of the Future and the Pact of the Future. And the idea also was not just how to improve the UN, but how to do it through a more serious conversation on reform as well. And I was saying to you that the old order that emerged from the Second World War is no longer tenable as well, that you have to now rethink the table. Now the P5 are going to, the permanent five are going to stay at the table. The question is who else you bring to the table, and the so-called Global South are making a case. As I was saying to you, they are the ones who are influential. We don't necessarily always run up to Paris and Washington and New York to solve these conflicts. We're increasingly going to Addis Ababa, the home of the African Union. We're going to the Gulf region, to Qatar, to UAE. These are vital actors to the process. India as well has become quite a relevant actor. So I think if you're going to, come up with a new world order, it has to be an order that is far removed from the post-Cold War and begin to think about these other actors who are increasingly shaping facts on the ground in their regions in a way that I don't think that Security Council members quite have grasped in a coherent way.
Well, when you talk about the P5, already we've heard from the United States that they are open to Africa having a seat, but the question is a veto.
Yeah, they're not going to give up. They're not going to give up the veto. Let's just be a bit clear about that. The question you should be asking is whether they're prepared to extend the veto to others. And I don't think. I don't want to say it's not possible, but I think there are a number of issues that the size of the Security Council, how will the veto be yielded by non-permanent five? I think you and I can safely say is that the P5 will jealously guard the veto power and will make sure that is not watered down. There is conversations, yes, Brazil, India, 2 African countries. Question is which of the 2 African countries as well. So we have to have a process in Africa through the African Union to decide which of the 54 gets to represent the continent in this way as well. So lots of questions, but I don't think the permanent five are going to give up the veto, and they'll jealously guard it to the extent that you have to ask questions about, again, the influence of the Security Council going forward.
Dr. Ero, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. Thank you.